So hello everyone, welcome to another 30-minute Change Tool webinar that we're hosting here at Nexus for Change. We do these weekly. This is the first one of the year. We took a little bit of a break over the holidays. Hope that you had a fantastic slide into the new year, as we say back home in my old country, in Germany. We had a bunch of sessions last year. Those are all available to you in blog posts with links to the video recordings. Please check that out, nexusforchange.com/blog4change. There are events upcoming, including our Great Lakes Exchange local gathering next Saturday, January the 18th, for the design session on Friday the 17th. Those links will all be available to you in the follow-up that I've sent to you. Today, we are here to talk about collaborative roadmaps. And thank you so much for joining me this morning. The question with collaborative roadmaps that a lot of times seems to come up is that we struggle with really good clarity of the processes and the procedures that we put forward to help our teams make good collaborative decisions and to ensure that we are indeed making the impact that we're intending to make. Collaborative roadmaps are a robust tool that, once you turn them into a visual, can really help show a clear and efficient path forward for you and your team and identify what steps need to be taken. So in creating your collaborative roadmap or project roadmap, you're answering Ron Lippitt's 3 questions. They are: what is the purpose, who needs to be involved, and what conversations need to take place? If you are interested in digging into that particular tool a little bit more, in the chat, I'm putting a link to a blog post that we actually had one of these 30-minute Change Tool webinars that very specifically talked about those 3 questions. So in order to address those, as a German, I offered that information to you, that's my heritage. What I'm really after are these 3 questions. Who's getting it done? Who are they working with to do it? And when is it done? So that's important information that's also available to you on a collaborative roadmap. The roadmaps that we leverage here at Nexus for Change are based basically on 2 core frameworks that inform the layout and the way that we utilize them. One is the PLAN. PLAN is a project management framework that is based in the PMBOK approach, but specifically looks at these 4 elements. P for the purpose, or the why of why are you embarking on this project, this initiative, this particular program that you're looking to leverage. L is for the leaders and stakeholders, the who that needs to be engaged. A is for the actions or the agenda that needs to be completed toward your impact. And N identifies the needs, the resources that will enable your actions. The second framework is RACI plus F. Originally comes from actually work in NASA, where they were trying to identify within larger groups and teams who are the people that are responsible, who's accountable, who needs to be consulted with, and who needs to be informed as part of the effort that we're putting forward. And sort of in our practice and what people have been doing, they've added the plus F, who's facilitating all of this. Again, there's another link that I will share with you in the chat that looks specifically at this particular tool, the RACI plus F model, that helps you identify who your stakeholders are and need to be, if you want to dig into that element at a little bit of a deeper level. So let's look at what one of these roadmaps might look like. I'm sharing with you, and this is probably important to look at because roadmaps tend to get busy and you might want to have a look at a little more detail. The link that I just put in, the Google Drive link, is to a PDF that gives you a little more detailed view of this roadmap template that I'm sharing with you. And as you see, this particular roadmap has 4 phases. That doesn't mean that that's all you can have. Maybe you have a particular project that only has 3. Maybe you have as many as 7. Maybe it's an effort that spans several years and you have multiple phases that have sub-phases and sub-steps. So I'm not trying to say that you only have 4 phases to every roadmap. But you can see that on the very top is listed the overall purpose. You see the leaders and stakeholders, the L in our PLAN framework listed on the left in the individual rows. The actions are what you would be filling in into this roadmap and all the blank spaces that you can see here on this slide. And the needs are at the bottom, the resources that you need to list and identify for each of the phases that you are going through. So if we're looking at this in a little bit more detail, let's start at the top with the columns. You have the overall purpose and the individual phases listed for each of the columns. You can see that one optional column identifier here would be what sort of large group or large person events, engagements coincide with each of your phases. The suggestion here for a 4-phase process might be that you have a convening meeting in the beginning, a launch event in phase 2, then some community summit that engages maybe your audience or participants specifically in the implementation phase, the 3rd phase here, and at the end, the celebration event. If you look at the PDF that I shared with you, the purpose statement across the top is actually the purpose statement for the collaborative roadmap. So you would have to replace that with the specific purpose statement for your effort, for your initiative or program. And you also see here that there are phase purposes identified. If you look at the PDF example that I shared, there are some suggestions as what that might look like. So for your phase 1, that purpose for that initial 4-week span might be something like identifying core stakeholders that commit to our process. Again, that will be very specific to your project and your effort that you're putting in here. But at the top, the columns, you have focus on the purpose and establishing your timeline. If you're looking at the rows down the left side of the roadmap, you are identifying the who, the L in the PLAN framework. Who are your leaders and stakeholders? Those are the people that will need to be coordinated. They're the ones that you need to involve. There are the facilitators, and at the bottom, you have that last row, your reality check, the resources, the tools, the materials, the facilities that are necessary for your effort. So looking at those in a little bit more detail, the first listing there are your leaders and stakeholders that are responsible from that RACI framework and accountable. These tend to be typically our existing and established groups in your organization. That might be the folks in HR, that might be a fundraising team, that might be a strategy group, an operations team. Those are the folks that have to actually implement and carry out the individual tasks and items that are on your agenda, on your to-do list to get the overall accomplished. The second group are the folks that you need to involve. They are your partners. They might be community leaders, community resources that need to be engaged. And then the obvious, but that sometimes we forget, your audience, your participants. What kind of testing are you doing? Hey, this is what we're thinking about with actual users of that process, with actual clients, customers, and so forth. A lot of times, what I see is that we think, okay, well, we've informed that particular stakeholder group, but informing often isn't enough. A lot of times it's really about consulting with them, getting their voice heard, getting their input, and making that a serious point of conversation to not just, hey, we told you what we're doing, but to say, what is your input, what is your feedback, and to bring that to bear. The last group in this particular listing then are the facilitators. Want to talk about those in a little bit more detail. You typically have a leadership team that you need to engage. That includes the people that have the power to say no, go or no go about your project. They probably have some say in what kind of budgets you can spend or have access to. So those need to be considered in how you're moving forward. The second group is what we're calling a seed team or steering team. Typically the people that brought forth that initial idea or initial effort that planted the seed of your idea, if you will, at some point turn into the steering team, where they are now the ones that are, if you will, the project managers for your effort that help move it forward. The third row is what we're calling a change network team. You might have already some established moniker for that in your organization, but these are the leaders or representatives of each of the workstream teams that we had here on this previous slide. So in order to make sure that the fundraisers and the evaluators and the communication team are connected and are talking to each other. This change network team, that typically means at some sort of a regular time interval, maybe every 2 weeks, maybe once a month, but they get together and make sure that there's connectivity between the work that is done, for example, in HR, that they're connected to fundraising and coordinate that with the strategy group, for example. The last row are design teams. Those are as needed teams that you would convene, for example, for a specific training that's part of your effort, or an educational event or community event. And I will put into the chat yet one more resource link for you. We did also have a 30-minute webinar that looked specifically at design teams and what they do and how to best leverage them in your organization. Finally, you get to the reality check. What are the resources that we need to make this happen? What are our needs? What materials, facilities, what budget do we need for this to happen? We tend to think of the 4 T's. 4 T's are time invested, the talent that you need, the individuals, the folks that need to bring their abilities to bear, the treasurer, i.e. the budget, and the ties, the networks or connections that need to be part of your effort to be successful. As a whole, if you're looking at one that would be filled out, here's an example that actually came out of the Impact Collaborative work that Nexus for Change has done with E-Extension Foundation. This is obviously very dense and difficult to see. I'll put another link for you into the chat if you want to look at this particular example in more detail. But this was a roadmap that we created for a summer school program where parents and guardians would learn how to code with their youngsters. Coding seems to be something that really my 9-year-old can run circles around me in how that works and what he's doing. I have very limited knowledge, but there's actually really wonderful programs. MIT Scratch is one of them that this particular group of educators wanted to leverage as a summer program to bring parents and kids, their kids together to learn about coding and have a shared activity. And so you see the phases. In this case, there are 6 phases to this effort. You see the core process and the core deliverables listed at the very top with a purpose statement for each phase. You have the groups laid out on the left that are connected to this, and then filled in the actions in the center of what at each step, each individual group might be doing. At the bottom, you see the needs, some of them, and if you look, for example, under the very first phase, the need says open minds and positive reception for idea creation. So sometimes the needs aren't necessarily budgetary, but sort of in what is the attitude of the folks that are coming together to make this happen. Again, I'll share these PDFs with you in a follow-up email, as well as all the resource links that I've dumped into the chat here for you if you want to dig at any individual piece at a greater level of detail. But what we found is that really organizing it this way and looking at the people that are engaged, sort of structured through this RACI framework or RACI model that helps you identify who's responsible, accountable, who needs to be consulted with and informed, and who are the folks facilitating the effort. That is really helpful in keeping the structure something that is meaningful for people that are engaged and have everybody on the same page literally with this roadmap tool. Couple of tips if you're working on one, really spend time on your purpose statements. If you consider Simon Sinek's very successful TED Talk about starting with why, that idea of what is the purpose, why are we here, and coming back to that with regularity is really meaningful in these types of engagements. Second tip would be to not bump the needs row that is at the very bottom onto a second page. Use a larger document, maybe use a legal size paper if you're talking about a print form of this that you want to share. A lot of times that the images that I've showed you are probably a little bit misleading. You know, this particular example here only has one row at the bottom for the needs. A lot of times we see like bulleted list or numbered list at the bottom that are needs. Don't bump them to the second page where they sort of can maybe more easily be forgotten. A third piece would be, and I'm going to look real quick here and pull the PDF that I shared with you into my share screen. If you're looking at this example, let's see if it loads for me. When you're filling in particularly this evaluation line here as the responsibilities for the evaluation team, what are the core measures of impact for your project? You really want to get clarity around at each phase, at each step, what are some of the things that we need to track to show that we are indeed on track? Number one and number two, make sure that you proactively communicate that to your leadership team. That's what they're going to want to know. And in my experience, there's real power in sort of getting ahead of the curve and having a report to the leadership team about, hey, by the way, our core impact measures for the second phase, this is what we're tracking and here's where we're at, before they come to you to ask that question. Finally, make sure that everyone has access to the most up-to-date version of your roadmap. In many of the projects that I've been engaged with that we've used collaborative roadmaps, they were indeed in a Google document that was shared and had, depending on what people's needs were, maybe it had view-only access or it had comment-only access so that somebody could ask a question in that document, but not edit the document themselves unless they had the authority and need to do so. With that, are there any questions, any feedback?
Ayo, any challenges with the group dynamics as you've worked with teams on this, with this tool?
There are never any challenges with group dynamics, Dan. This tool is the perfect solution to any of that. No, I'm kidding. The key to making this work in this kind of structure, in my mind, is really often the leadership from this facilitating group. So if there is a steering team that sort of has become your project managers, if you will, it is absolutely critical that these folks meet, in my experience, weekly, and that they then communicate weekly with the leadership team to give them an update. That this change network team that represents all of the different groups that are engaged, whether it's the fundraisers, whether it's the communication team, that they're on the same page to make sure that communication goes through. The proactive piece, I think, is the one thing that I really want to emphasize in response to your question, then, to say that making an effort in the steering team, the change network team, to communicate any of your decision-making proactively before, say, the CEO or a leadership team member comes and says, hey, where are you guys at? What's going on? That seems to be a really powerful team to sort of quell potential tensions in the dynamics. But outside of that, you will always find all of the challenges that we always talk about that come with any sort of teamwork. This tool, I think, can help in allowing people to have an easy way to, in one place, see all the information that should be critical. And a good roadmap can help. Hey, we are on the same page. I feel connected to this process. So the frustration of, I don't know what so-and-so is doing and so-and-so is doing, is maybe something that specifically can be helped. Not maybe, that is specifically helped with using this particular tool.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Hi,
Al.
Hi there. In your left-hand column,
Yes.
could you, I use the RACI chart quite a bit, so I think it'd be good to distinguish between responsible and accountable. They're combined here, but they're distinct. And the same, I think everybody can understand the difference between consultant and form, but
Yeah.
maybe you could say something about responsible and accountable.
Sure. So again, this is intended to be a template that the idea was, how do we make this a one-pager that has everything in one place? What you're pointing out, Al, is one of the shortfalls of combining things that may not always make the most sense to combine. Somebody who's responsible, i.e. this is the person that is completing the task, might be a frontline staff that has gotten tasked with, this is what needs to be done, you check it off and the item is done. That doesn't mean that's the same person that's accountable for that task. That tends to be that individual supervisor, and there might be 15 folks completing tasks, but the manager is the one that has to report whether or not they were done or not. So yes, it may be meaningful to separate those depending on your specific project and not have them listed together in the same row.
Yeah, I often ask, who's got the A?
Yeah.
Because if you know that, then the A is usually going to be delegating to the people with the R.
Absolutely. So one thing that I maybe didn't specifically say, but that's important, depending on the scope of your project, any of these groups here in the RNA bracket, they might be one-man teams or one-woman teams or one-person teams, in which case that is the person that is both responsible and accountable. For any other grouping, each of these teams, let's say the evaluation team, needs to have a leader or a spokesperson that holds the A, as you point out, and then can delegate whatever the tasks are to those that have the R. Wendy says in the chat, I'm a visual learner and operator. I like seeing everything in one place, color-coded, and the hints in the form to remind me what I need to put there. Yeah, thank you. So it, I think it can be meaningful to use this tool, even if you're not necessarily intending to share it with the whole team or say, this is what we have to use. Sometimes folks, Wendy, I appreciate your response. I've sort of gotten the opposite response where people say, I don't want all this color coding and that's not how I wrap my head around this. You know, people have different ways of looking at the way they want to organize a project specifically. But I think if you're somebody that is a visual learner, it certainly helps to just put it on a piece of paper like this and then see if it's meaningful and valuable to you as a group. Do you have an example where this roadmap helped a team with building trust or managing, reducing disagreements and conflicts? Jill, I think my answer is probably similar to what Dan shared or what Dan asked about, in that it has helped people be on the same page and just communicating where are we at, particularly that that idea to say, where is the most up-to-date roadmap? I shouldn't ever have to ask this question if that is a tool that we're using. I should know whether or not I'm one of those frontline staff in fundraising. I should still go, where exactly is this document shared that's the most up-to-date? So I have purview, not just of my role and responsibility, but also what everybody else is doing. And that has helped, yes, to maybe not build trust, but to make sure that I continue to see that people are communicating and are proactive in sharing the information necessary for all of us to move forward through the phases. If there are no additional questions, I would be remiss if I didn't provide a shameless plug for our sponsors. You are hosted here today by Nexus for Change, and we are supported by the now going into the second semester doctorate program in organization development and change at Bowling Green State University, as well as the Change Library. You can find more information at nexusforchange.com library. Thank you so much for spending time with me and us here this morning, and have a fantastic rest of your week.